I'm the co-founder of the Los Angeles Bi+ Task Force and a board member as well. And I am a psychologist, a life coach, speaker, and community organizer. And so I have, done many talks around bisexuality. But believe it or not, this is actually my first panel just on Bi+ women. Um, and so this is very exciting. Our Bi-alogue series is something that I started with LABTF a few years ago, and we feature virtual panels on hot topics impacting our community. And we've covered many different topics, but I think the Bi+ community, we make up a lot of different identities within our community. We comprise of many different genders, ethnicities, ages, all of that. But the Bi+ women's community is a large part of our community, and we have specific, sort of things that happen to us, right? Specific needs, specific life experiences as women and as bisexual, pansexual, and fluid women in particular. And so tonight we're going to be dishing on all the highs and lows of what it's like to be a Bi+ woman in the modern day. All right, so we will get started with introductions of our amazing panel. I'm just so thrilled to have all of our speakers today. And so I'm going to introduce everybody. So first, I'm going to introduce Nicole Pacent, who is an actor, singer, writer, and LGBTQ activist. She currently plays Rebecca Wilson on Criminal Minds: Evolution on Paramount Plus, and has appeared on numerous television shows, including Westworld, Call Me Kat, Anyone But Me, Good Trouble, and Blackish. Nicole has worked in various facets of LGBTQ plus media for nearly 2 decades, having played many queer characters in LGBTQ projects, written for queer publications, created an educational YouTube series on bisexuality, and spent 5 years co-hosting Coming Out Pod, a weekly podcast that gives queer people from all walks of life the opportunity to tell their coming out stories. Nicole co-wrote the recently released bilingual LGBTQ series As Love Goes, and was the polyamory consultant on season 2 of the L Word, Generation Q. Nicole is also an alumnus of the Equality California Institute's Leadership Academy, which identifies LGBTQ plus leaders and provides them with tools and resources to seek appointed and elected office. Outside of her work in the queer community, Nicole is an advocate for mental health awareness and is working on a book of original essays on sibling loss and grief based on her experiences following the suicide of her younger sister in 2015. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nicole. And wave to everybody.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this.
Wonderful. All right, so next I'm introducing Charmee Taylor. Charmee is a proud bisexual actor, writer, and content creator on Beyonce's Internet. She is based in Los Angeles, California, but from a small Pennsylvania town where she attended Pennsylvania State University. Charmee's debut book, Confessions of a Bisexual, an interactive memoir for baby gays, has received glowing reviews. Since living in Los Angeles, she was nominated for a Broadway World Award for Best Leading Actress in a Play and Best Play of the Year. As well, received the Encore Choice Award for the improv troupe that she co-founded and produced, and landed a job at Paramount Pictures. She's an actress, blogger, and YouTuber who's been featured on Hello Giggles and BuzzFeed. Her dream is to create an HBO TV show that is a cross between Insecure and Girls, where she explores queerness in comedy. She has also written for the Bisexual Resource Center, Salty, Sanctuary Mag, and more. Charmee also has a podcast called Hot Bi Summer, which is a perfect mix of all the things pop culture, relationships, coming out later in life, and bisexual representation in TV and film. Say hi, Charmee.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to get started.
Great. Awesome. And then last but not least is Fiona Dawson, who is an Emmy-nominated and award-winning filmmaker and founder of Free Lion Productions. She is a proud bisexual cisgender immigrant woman living with a non-apparent disability who uses media to advance equity. Following her short New York Times op-doc Transgender at War and in Love, Fiona was honored by President Obama as an LGBT artist champion of change. Her feature documentary, Trans-Military, premiered at South by Southwest, winning the Audience Award. And Fiona was an honoree on the Out 100 2022 LGBTQ plus Titans of Media and Entertainment. She is a #1 best-selling author with 2 books published, the latest title being What Does That LGBTQIA Plus Label Mean? Explaining the spectrum of gender and sexuality with humor and ease. Prior to starting her own business, Fiona worked in corporate social responsibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Fiona's company, Free Lion Productions, creates multimedia personal storytelling content using video, animation, and speaking engagements to build empathy. As an acclaimed speaker, Fiona's presentations include a private briefing to the Assistant Secretary Generals of NATO and entertaining an audience of over 3,000 at the Disability In Conference. Fiona is a DEI BA consultant with an expertise in LGBTQIA2S+ inclusion. She's on a mission to decolonize the worldview of gender and sexuality with inspiring education and entertainment. So everyone, welcome Fiona. Yay. Okay.
Yay, thank you so much.
I can't wait to jump into the questions. And so we will get right to it. Okay, so ladies, please tell us what are some highlights and lowlights that you have experienced in your coming out journey as a bi plus woman? I want to hear all about it. Anyone can start.
I'm happy to have somebody else start. I was just
I mean,
Okay, I'll get it started. I'll get it started. So
and go.
say, coming out for me wasn't sort of like a typical experience. I felt like, and I talk about this in my book often, and I think about this and talk about this often, is I thought there was going to be like a cotillion, and I was going to go to West Hollywood, and everybody's gonna be like, "You're bi, come, welcome, welcome." And I thought it was gonna be this whole thing, and all the gays were gonna be like, "Yes, now you're gonna have all the sex in the world. You're gonna do all these things." And I was so excited because I was like, "Yes, I finally found the label that feels so comfortable to me." And turns out that does not happen. That does not happen at all. And so I felt like a lot of my validation came from sort of like, I wanted it to come from outside of myself. And because of that, I feel like in many ways, I sunk into like a little bit of a depression after coming out because it was really traumatic and scary. It was not at all like the movies and TV shows told me. And I often think about the fact that I have the intersection of also being a Black woman. And in the Black community, coming out is not sort of something we talk about or think about. And I often think about the fact that Black women in particular, our womanhood is outside the binary of what womanhood looks like in many ways, especially in media. And so, highlights I would say is that I had some really eye-opening discussions. And when you're kind of the first person to sort of talk about these things, all your other friends start coming out too. You're like, oh, okay, everybody's a little fruity. I love this. So that's really exciting, and that was definitely a highlight, but definitely a low light for me was this feeling of wanting outside validation and not necessarily getting it. And I had to like sort of build that inner confidence within myself.
Here you
I'd
go.
like to ask, can I ask Charmee a question? Like, how old were you when you came out as bi? And was bi plus, pan, whichever label is best for you? Like, was that the first label you chose, or was it a journey of different labels until you landed at that?
That's a great question. So I came out when I was about 27, 28 for the Astro Girlies. I was in my Saturn return trying to figure out some things. And so I was around 27, 28, and at that point it was about 2019, and I had watched a bunch of like lesbian YouTubers, and I was like, this kind of feels right, but it's not quite fitting, and I don't know why it is. But then once I started researching the term bisexual, I was like, oh, that makes sense, but not quite. And then I was like, oh, I'm Black too. So that adds another flavor to the pot. So by once I understood the definition, I was like, okay, this feels right. But also that flavor of being, a woman, the flavor of being a Black woman, and what that looks like has also like flavored my bisexuality.
Thank you for adding that context. I had wondered too. I was like, oh, when was this? When was that? Because the when makes a huge difference. I mean, a massive difference, even a few years. And it's actually like contextualizes what I was going to say, which is I came out in the year 2000. So I've been out for 24 years. She's insane. But I came out when I was 15 years old. Don't do the math. And so the world looked a lot different. And what I was dealing with when I was coming out was not only, a pre-equal marriage world, a pre like representation in media, pre like LGBT centers. I mean, we're talking at least that like in any sort of way that you could really find outside of a major city, it was pre all of that. So it was that, but then also I was 15. So it was couched in, all of the regular adolescent stuff of like, what are my friends going to think? And blah, 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 and being very, very frightened of all of that. So I would say I had I was fortunate in that I lived in like, in a suburb of New York and Connecticut where, not to get into politics, where we had people describe themselves as socially liberal but fiscally conservative. We could break that down, but we won't. Anyway, that's a different panel. But so it was not something that was embraced, but it wasn't something where I was told that I was going to hell. So that's good. But in dealing with it, for me, it was like my mom was the biggest challenge, frankly. Like, and I have found that in talking with so many queer folks that often it's the parent of the same sex or gender that has the hardest time with it. Anyway, but yes, so my mom took some time, and she had all like the myths about bisexuality swimming in her head. And it was also a process of years, really, because, I would have a girlfriend and then I'd have a boyfriend and she'd be like, oh, I guess it was face. And then it was not face. And then I'd have a girlfriend again, and then we had to go through the whole thing again. So that, again, it is contextual, but I will say that I highlight of coming out, when I did, was that I got in on kind of the ground floor of queer representation in media, and is why then I spent so much of my career dedicated to queer media and in the queer media space. I saw, for those of you who know it, Anyone But Me was a web series that came out of actually the writer's strike of 2008, so the prior writer's strike to the one last year. And I saw that there were queer characters. I saw that one of the creators was one of the creators of the L Word, and I was 23 years old, and I was like, this is what I needed when I was a teenager. I would love to be part of this. I would love an audition, the whole thing. And it wasn't what got me the role, but it got me the audition, just being out at that time and being able to speak from the heart about my own experience and what I wanted as a teenager. So in many ways, like a highlight of coming out and being out at that time was like starting my career, honestly. So, yeah.
So my story, for context, I'll share that my accent is from England, but I've actually lived and worked in this country for 24 years. So then for further context, I'm proudly going to tell you my age. I am 47 and a half years old. And for actually, I say,
Teenage.
yeah, exactly. I think we're the same age, aren't we? But I say I'm 47 years strong. I am also fighting ageism as well. So that's another ism that I'm going for.
Believe in. There you go.
So I grew up in a very rural town, which there was a severe lack of diversity. And some of you have heard this story, so forgive me for those that are thinking, Fiona's going to tell us the same story again. But I was a teenager. I was watching TV with my dad, and he blurted out, I can understand men being gay and I can understand women being lesbians, but I think bisexuals are just greedy. I'm like, okay. I had not ever questioned my sexual orientation. I identified as straight all the way up until I was 27. So I fell in love and married a straight, white, cis het man. We got married thinking it was death till us part. But the marriage ended and I came flying out the closet as lesbian. I was in love with a woman. I was in that relationship for 2 years. And so my labels went from straight to gay/lesbian without even consideration of a bi plus identity. After that relationship ended, and then I'm like single and floating around for about 5 or 6 years. And I moved from Houston, where I've been living, up to New York. And it was 2012. And I'm not saying it's New York's fault, but I just happened to be in New York when I realized that the only reason I was turning down a date with a guy, and back then I was still using very binary language, but I was only turning down dates with guys because I'd labeled myself gay or lesbian. But if I was honest with myself, then I actually did have an attraction to that person. And I had this fear because my time in Houston, I was known as an out gay woman. Like I was the female grand marshal of the Houston Pride Parade. I was that gay. And so to come out as bisexual was really even more scary than it was to come out as gay or lesbian. And so I told a handful of friends who I knew that they would be like, have my back. And then I did a YouTube video that looks like it was uploaded by a dinosaur compared to all the TikToks out there that are so freaking cool. But explaining my bi plus identity. And for the most part, I would say that I've had a pretty positive experience. And yet that's what, now 12 years ago. And still today, it still feels like a struggle sometimes, or exhausting to have to like come out and try and explain. And whereas when you come out as gay or lesbian, there's less explanation that comes in that conversation. And it's kind of like a defense, especially because our bi plus identities are such on a spectrum. Like we look so different, or our relationship models are so different. And so that's where I feel like the explanation always comes in. And I think, but the high has been finding power in my own identity, which I really see as a non-binary sexual orientation. And then my work advocating and uplifting trans and non-binary stories has really like intersected well with, like, interestingly with that. Like it's been such a huge education. Today I feel like being bi plus is a superpower. Like it gives you like an intersect into life and into spirituality, and it takes us out of just human flesh and bones and into like a whole spiritual astrological spiritual world. And I feel like that launched me into all of that. So yeah, there's my reply.
That is lovely. I love that visual. And I think we should combine that with Charmee's idea of having a big party or parade. Why not? Yeah. But yes, I actually came out very close to your time, Nicole, in 99. So yes, I remember those times. So lovely. Well, thank you so much for sharing, all of your coming out experiences. I can see there's definitely some similarities that, you've all experienced. So this got brought up a little bit around dating. But I'm curious, what it's been like for all of you in terms of being in sexual or romantic relationships with people of different genders throughout your life. So, for us, that would namely be straight men, lesbian women, or bi, trans, non-binary folks.
I'll try to condense this because obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I could say for me, 24 years had a lot of dating. So there's a big whole spectrum. And you know, and interestingly, dating my first girlfriend now identifies as non-binary and has for many years. And I have several people who I dated who were lesbians at the time now identify as either transmasc or non-binary or somewhere on that spectrum. And actually, I found that to be fascinating, like all of our human journeys and just watching their own evolution and things. But certain things about when we were dating making more sense. You know, things that they were struggling with but couldn't sort of identify at the time. And I've found to be very interesting as we all gain more language into our identity. I will say, you know, well, so for those who may have guessed, I also identify as polyamorous, which you know, we could talk about whether that's a ingrained thing or whether that's a choice or whether it's some facsimile thereof. But basically, being poly allows me the experience to, or ethically non-monogamous, allows me the experience to be with multiple people of multiple genders at the same time. And for me, I have little personally. I know this is like a bisexual stereotype, and a lot of my journey has had to be being like, it's fine. It's you just be you. But for me, I don't have a lot of interest in dating people of the same gender at the same time. If I'm going to date multiple people at the same time, and usually it's only two, I can't really handle any more than that. Then I would prefer them to be different genders because I find it to be such a different experience. Oh my God, just I am married to a cis straight male, which is one experience in and of itself. And then I'm currently with a non-binary, like femme presenting human being, which is a very, very different experience. And my ex-girlfriend was identified as a female lesbian. So I just, for me, not to get like too mushy about it, but I find that those
You
different
can get mushy.
well, those different genders.
I'm a therapist, you know, we can get touchy-feely here.
I mean, on every conceivable level, the physical connection, the emotional connection, the intellectual connection, the experiential connection that you have with different genders is so different. Each of them are bringing their own full selves to the table, and from their bodies to the way that they were sort of molded in society, being looked at as one gender or another or whatever. And there are things that I can relate to about being with women. And there are things that feel freeing about being with somebody of a different gender where I get to experience a different paradigm, you know? But for me, one can never be the other, can never be the other. And that is something that took me a long time to accept, I would say, about myself, because I think we carry around this weight as bisexuals of being like, you're greedy, you know? And I really choose to look at it as I'm just fascinated by people, and I'm lit up by connections with unique individuals who identify in different ways. And I feel like finally at 39 years old, I'm celebrating that. So I hope that's not too general, what I just said. But anyway, that's my experience.
I love that. I think that's so beautiful and so magical. And I always get so grateful for being bisexual, because I truly, like Fiona was saying, it's like it truly is a gift that we get to experience different genders, that we get to experience different people. And I feel like I've always had a hunger for understanding different cultures, different backgrounds, different types of people. And the fact that I can see that through the lens of bisexuality is just so magical. Like I feel like it's such a gift. And with that gift, there are people that try to dim your light, and dating in particular, I talk about this all the time in on TikTok, maybe too much. But it sucks. Like dating sometimes in LA sucks, especially as a Black femme. It's really, really difficult. And it took a lot of time for me to understand why that was. And I would, I'd go to these like events, and I was like so excited to be like, yes, we're gonna pop out and have a time. Yeah, I'm gonna go through like a queer, like, slut phase, and it's gonna be great and fantastic. But I would show up to these events and so excited, and I realized that I looked different than the people around me, and I went through a really like sort of strange time where I thought I was ugly and unattractive and unlovable. And so kind of like trying to prove to people in dating, sort of with multiple genders, just trying to prove to people that like, hey, I'm lovable. Hey, 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 it's me. Hey. And that game got really exhausting, deeply, deeply, profoundly exhausting. And it really took a lot of like just taking a step back for me to say like, what do we really want? Like, what do you really, really want? And the experience of dating sort of multiple genders has been such a magical thing, but I think also with the intersection of being a Black woman, it's not easy, and nobody talks about it. And I feel like I wish I would have had a little bit of a heads up, like, hey, but nobody talks about it. And it doesn't mean that, especially if you're a Black femme and you're listening, you should know that you're beautiful and magical and special, and you deserve love, and you deserve all the beauty that comes with a romantic story, And so, yeah, it was not easy. It was certainly not easy, but, I am currently in the first relationship that I've ever been with a woman, and it is wild. It is a wild trip, and there's a lot of firsts, and I feel very much like a baby gay, and I'm like, oh my God, there's this beautiful person. Oh my God, this is incredible. And it's really magical. It's really, really magical, especially after, as women, we're socialized to, be with a cis man, and they have to chase you. And it's kind of empowering being like, oh, okay, I can buy you flowers. Oh, I can do these things. It's really, we've celebrated our year, and it's still blowing my mind. And I feel mushy talking about it. And I'm a Scorpio, so I'm like, nobody needs to know I'm mushy. Nobody needs to know this. But it's really magical. It's really, really magical and really special. And there's almost this part of me that's like, why didn't I get to experience this earlier in life? But all these firsts after my Saturn return has been truly magical. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Charmee, I wish I had known my identity when I was in college.
Yes, same.
It would have been
Thank
so much
you.
fun.
Yeah.
It's like, but our journeys are our journeys, can't change that.
Yeah.
Back to like what my dad said when I was a teenager. It's like when I came out as bisexual, I realized, oh, that's what everyone still says, like 20, 30 years later, that bisexuals are just greedy. And now I'm like, no, you don't have to be bisexual to be greedy, and there's nothing wrong with being greedy. And I think, like, going to what you were saying, Nicole, like that greedy word ties to promiscuous, ties to non-monogamy and poly, and like there's all those stigmas and stereotypes against the bi plus community. And not you again, it's like there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's a relationship model, and it's not just tied to bi plus people. Like you could be straight and have that relationship model as clearly your husband you just described. So it's like, okay, let's try and expand our level of thinking of non-binary relationships as well. So the question was like, your experience of dating. I'm single now. I would love to have a partner, date somebody. I have gone through different periods of my life where I've just, considered, do I want to be poly, or monogamous or whatever. right now I feel like I would like to be monogamous. So I'm just putting it out there. If anyone knows somebody who might be a good match for me, please let me know, because I would love to find somebody. Because because I also question, like, how have I reached like 47 years old and I'm still single? Like, what the hell is going on? So I think to myself, like, it has to be me. It's probably not anything to do with being bi plus. It's like, what do I have to learn in this lifetime, to attract the right person? But and also I've like dated across the gamut, like, of people of different genders, a few different ethnicities, like, there's been a spectrum of people I've been with. And I will tell you that best experience has been with the straight men, where they're not, and like, this stereotype of like, oh, the straight man wants to date the bi woman because he wants to, have a threesome or a group or whatever, and like fetishizing. I've never experienced that. Like, I've had the best support. In fact, my favorite ex-boyfriend, his name's Emil, and like we went to a queer bar, and basically men were hitting on him and then questioning why we were in the bar. It was like, what, you're straight, like, what are you doing here? And I kind of like, I'm bisexual. And they're like, yeah, whatever, you're a straight couple now. And it was like, it's been so painful, like, especially coming from having been the female grand marshal for the Pride Parade, like dedicating my entire life to promote queer equity, and yet being told you don't belong in a space. And then I've had micro and or macro aggressions from lesbian women that I've dated. Somebody once said something so they used a swear word that I'm not going to use it on this Zoom call right now because it's been recorded, but they said something really horrific. And then, like, on dating apps, and I took this as an example, like, basically this is a dating app and this is a lesbian woman, and it says you should not go on a date you should not go out on a date with me if you're married, not over your ex, coupled, or bisexual. And it's like, that's in text on a dating app. And it's like, that kind of stuff, like, just is so driven to help people understand, like, the spectrum of gender and sexuality, and that this is not a label that you need to look down on someone simply because they have the amazing, beautiful capacity to be attracted to somebody of a similar or a different gender. There's like such a lack of knowledge from that. So in summary, my dating experience has been an interesting mix, and I'm still looking forward to embracing somebody that's going to be a great match for me.
Okay, so everyone, Fiona is single. Go ahead and contact her. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I think it's wonderful to, sort of give props to just being able to date cis straight men. I think sometimes there's a lot of imposter syndrome around bi plus women having attractions to men. But I think it's just one of the genders that we're attracted to. Right. So I don't think there should be any shame around that. There's a comment in the chat about just appreciation for seeing bisexuality as a gift. And I think that there's some love there for that. I wish we could talk a lot more about the dating stuff. I feel like we could probably just do a whole Bi-alogue just on that. But I wanted to ask about, since it's been, a few decades now, since you've all, come out, some of you longer than others, but what would you say are your thoughts about the representation of bi plus women in the media or just in your industry?
Someone want to take it?
I can take it. That I think about this this is the question that keeps me up at night. This is the reason why I like started my podcast and really like think critically about media, because I too grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, very conservative, and felt so wacky and silly. And the first time I ever heard or seen on television what bisexuality was, it was Tila Tequila's A Shot at Love. And that did something to my brain. It glitched. Like, I think that genetically changed my DNA forever. Like, seeing her sort of like slappy drunk, making out with girl, making out with guy. I was like, I want to do that, but not like that. You know what I mean? And so it was really tough. And so I think critically about media, and like media is political. The TikToks that we see are political. The videos that we watch are political. They have meaning and messages. Somebody, saying something and doing something means something. Every little detail means something. And so I often think about the fact that in terms of representation, I think it's so important that there's forward-facing representation and that we get those stories and we get those important things. However, I think it's also really, really important that we have executives that are bisexual. We have people at the studios when writers are writing their scripts and sending it to the studio, and they'll be like, actually, we actually don't want these two characters to kiss, like in Scooby-Doo. And you see all the tension and you're like, why does it look like they want to kiss each other? But like there needs to be people at the top making these decisions. And as somebody who worked at a studio, you really see how the sausage is made, and you realize that it's not just about writing these stories or seeing bisexuality play out in TV shows. It's really about the executives not canceling these shows. The executive saying, no, 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 we understand the demographic, we understand the story. Let's suss this out, let's not traumatize our viewers by killing off bisexuals. So I think, yeah, I often think about media and how political it is and what it means to us. And I think we all, especially now, need to be very critical of the types of things we are seeing and consuming. And don't just take it for face value and being like, let me think about what this means. And I like you mentioned in my bio, I would love to write a TV show that's kind of this intersection of girls and insecure, and watching bisexuals, not just talking about these storylines of coming out, just living, being authentic, having fun, I don't know, going on vacation, like just living authentically. And I think that's really powerful.
Can I continue? I mean, because like I bet, from that vein, like I would love to see bi characters where being bisexual is not part of the plot twist or part of the main center. That it's like bisexuals just living their lives. And I totally agree with everything you said, Charmee. And I bet you that there are executives that are not out and are afraid to come out, and they could make these decisions, but they don't feel empowered enough to make those decisions. And that's one of the things that we can try and help shift, culturally. And so yeah, I like, in terms of like role models, like in my work, it's like an intersection of film, television, media making, but also corporate DI stuff. And two of the main role models that I see are Erin Yurtis, who's the CEO of Out and Equal, and Kiera Johnson, who's the CEO of the LGBTQ plus task force. And like these are some of the main national organizations in the United States, and they're headed up by bisexual women. And like last year, I was at the Out and Equal conference, like Disney was sponsoring and hosting it. And you've got Erin standing on stage, like a CEO, and you've got like a sea of 5,000 people with all of the top corporations in this country, if not, therefore the world, in the room. And she stands there and says, I am an out proud bisexual woman. And like, I burst into tears because it's so rare to see an executive and to see a CEO, especially a woman, like stand there and be an out bi woman. And like, that's the type of person, that I look up to as a possibility model. And then I'll add that my ambition to create content is I'm working on an unscripted docu-follow series that I host called Out with Fiona. And November 1st, I received a letter from PBS. They're picking it up for distribution. So my intention is to be slowly one of those out bi women. And I want to work with all of you. And we're going to go like change the narrative on our stories. And there you go.
Yeah, love that. Yes. Piggybacking on that, I also have a show that a pilot that I wrote that is at the center of it is a bisexual woman. And like I want to see, here's the thing. I want to see bisexuals just living their lives, where we like don't have to make it about like the hardship of being bi, but also I want to say bisexuality. I think like that is something that for me really bothers me. Is I'm like I feel like shows more often deal with bisexuality by going, yeah, I mean, I'm just, the character is like, I don't label it. I love who I love, And like for those for whom that is the case, that is fine. But that's not saying bisexual, and that's not celebrating bisexuality and what bisexuality is. That's this, I mean, it's it's sort of like skipping a lot of years where we need to explore bisexuality itself and that paradigm and jumping to this like utopic place where we're all just loving who we love and we're colorblind and we're this and we're that. You know what I mean? Like there is a reason that we lift out specific identities and we draw attention to those and we name them because each of those identities have very real important experiences that are unique to themselves that deserve labels. I mean, so it's not I'm not trashing anybody that doesn't use labels. My God, do whatever floats your boat. But I find that in media there is this approach to bisexuality where they don't say the word, and as a result they really don't show the experience. They really don't. They what they're interested in more is having, and I say this having played a lot of these roles, they're more interested in having the queer representation, but not having to name it as such. Just it being, you're seeing people of the same gender together, or people who are, identifying somewhere on the gender spectrum in their lives, whatever. But there is this like reticence to use the word. And and whether that word is bisexual or pansexual, by the way, or bi plus, fine. But like, I don't know. To me, I would like to see more of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely saw that on Orange is the New Black, right, with the main character. And I've talked a lot about my own coming out journey where I did not hear the B word until I got to college. And so I think it is just so important to hear somebody say bisexual or pansexual, because I think it would have helped me probably come out sooner. Yeah, absolutely.
I was also going to say that there's this really good book called Claiming the Bee in LGBT. And there's a whole section dedicated to different sort of stereotypes that we see in media, and not saying the word is labeled as one of those things. And it's so important. I completely agree with you. It's so important. But that book is a really, really great resource.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for that. So in terms of, these different issues that we've been talking about today and bringing up around, culture, identities, politics, and all that, what would you say are the most important, I guess, issues that you feel are impacting bi plus women today?
That's a huge question.
I know, very, very easy. How do we save the world?
I don't. Do either of you want to go first? I mean, not really. Like this was the one I was like, let's ask ChatGPT. No, okay. But do you want me to say something? I don't want to. Possible to say what the one thing is. Like it like there's a whole myriad of things, and I think just to start off with, when I was thinking about this question, I think it's just a simple like lack of recognition, visibility, like apparency. And I try to use apparency rather than just visibility, to try not to be too ableist. But I mean, it's just our existence and that we're here. And again, knowing that of the LGBT population, 60% actually identifies bisexual, but because of stigma and stereotype, we don't want to come out. Women of color, Black women are more likely to be bisexual. We've got all these different changing demographics. And I'm not on social media a lot, but I'm aware that I think a lot of people on social media are doing their best to kind of uplift and raise awareness about our existence. But I think it kind of goes back to what we were just saying now, where we're completely erased in film and TV. Like, I would love to sit down and watch some show and have a bi plus woman there just living her life and it not being a main event. And, you know, just being part of a character. I would love to live in a world where not just bi plus women, but all different genders are recognized as living amongst the spectrum of sexual orientation as well, rather than like too much of like we're constantly seeing the straight narrative. And therefore, you know, the queer rights movement, when it comes to policy and equity, for too long we've been trying to model a hetero narrative or a hetero policy box as, oh, we're meant to fit into this box in order to achieve equity. I'm like, F that. Let's just like let's take culture that way instead of trying to go back and fit in this box, which is why, you know, my mission statement is to decolonize the worldview of gender and sexuality, because colonization put us in these binary boxes of gender and sexual orientation. Why are we trying to fit that mold? Like, aren't we meant to be advancing, you know, society and culture? So let me say that. But then also when it comes to concerns, it's like Mimi and I and Ellen, we've been involved in advocacy at the national level with the, you know, health and human services. Like, you know, we have poorer health rates, we have higher rates of morbidity and mortality. Like, healthcare is a huge, huge issue, you know, amongst, you know, other things. And so I want to add that. And then one more thing before I'm going to turn it over, because I was recently thinking, you know, about years of being involved in bi plus advocacy, how we've constantly been said that we are the invisible majority, we need to be seen and heard. But right now in our country, trans people are being used politically more than ever. And it just like, I had this thought go through my head in and out. So apologies if this doesn't land right with all of you, but I'm like, is our lack of visibility, as detrimental as it is, a privilege because we're not being attacked? And it's like, are we going to be able to change culture without being used as political bait? Because most people are not straight. I firmly believe that. And I think that if we can change the narrative and if we can empower people to be out and to feel safe in their non-binary sexual orientation, a politician's just going to overlook that. Because if, you know, if we're the majority, does that mean we're not being used as political pawns? Like, are they using trans lives to attack others because they know that they're in, you know, they're such a smaller part of the population? Like, there's just so much confusion around that. And I hope that what I just said, like, makes some sense to somebody, but it's the very first time I've ever thought about it, in that, is our lack of visibility protecting us right now? And how strange is that?
I think sometimes it is, but I would also say that there are a lot of trans people who are bi. So there's a lot
Most trans people are bi, yeah.
In our communities. Like, I mean, I think in many ways, I was going to say as well that what's happening insofar as trans rights is of enormous concern to the bisexual community. I think on multiple levels. Number one, because there so many members of the trans community are also members of the bisexual community, and then of course we are all members of the greater queer community.
Right.
But I think there is some really beautiful because we keep going back to this on like a spiritual level. I think there are really beautiful connections between people who experience the world through a bisexual lens and people who experience the world through a trans and non-binary lens. There is something of a deviance that goes beyond just being a cis lesbian or a cis gay man, and something of an expanded view of the gray area of the human experience that I think where I think we have a lot of crossover. So I think that trans people beyond just being other queer folks are our natural allies too. So I would say that what's happening with them is of enormous concern to our community, as they are ours as well. And then I will say on a more positive note, but also related to what I just said, when I thought about this question, the first thing that came to mind, and I can really only speak for myself because I also recognize that I'm in a position of privilege as like a white or white passing like cis woman. And I've had, and I have just, I'm also comfortable speaking with people who don't agree with me. And I know that not everybody feels that way and not everybody is equipped that way for whatever reason. So I can only speak for myself, but I feel as though we as bisexual people who feel prepared or able to do it are in a position right now to like be healers of the world. I really, really feel that because there is so much division. And we, as we were speaking about with dating even, we have this experience of people that goes beyond the typical like cis het, sometimes monogamous lens. And I think it affords us, if we choose to use it that way, a greater sense of empathy, a greater ability to connect, a greater ability to see beyond how people are often judged on the surface. And I don't know, for me personally, I'm feeling very much the call to try to be a uniter, a connector, a reach across the divide person, in part because of what the lens of bisexuality has afforded me in this life. So yeah, anyway.
That's so beautiful. That's so powerful. I often think about like being bisexual is like it's such a gift because like you said, you can see the world through a different way. And it affords us the ability to have compassion beyond ways that I think I just don't see other people doing. And so yeah, it's really beautiful and I get grateful. And I love that you said that. To shift gears a little bit, I think when I think about this question, I think about like the socio-political sort of environment I grew up in. And I grew up super, super religious. And like, I think my bisexuality is such a gift because it was able to parse out this sort of religion and being socialized as a woman in this very specific type of performance that I felt like I had to do. And I feel like my queerness really sort of like cleansed me of those things. And so when it comes to bisexual women in particular, and maybe it's just my friends, I don't have the statistics, I don't know. But I feel like we all sort of are sort of in remission of religion and the toxicness that it just puts over parts of yourself or can put over parts of yourself. And so I feel deeply and profoundly grateful that bisexuality has afforded me the ability to question things. I think that's the biggest thing that I'm proud of is the curiosity that comes with bisexuality is saying, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I know we've been doing this, but that doesn't mean that that makes sense. Maybe that's common, maybe that's normal, but it doesn't make sense. And I remember being a teen and watching the pastor, say horrific words about, queer people, and thinking to myself, what? I'm like looking around like, how is everybody seeing what I'm like? This is weird, right? And that's that beautiful sort of like nuanced bisexual energy like really nudging me to question my surroundings. And I think as women in particular, we're taught to perform, um, we're taught to not ask questions. And the fact that or I feel like I've been afforded the ability through my bisexuality to question everything has been really healing and really scary. I'm not gonna lie. It's like free falling. Like, wait, maybe this sort of relationship style doesn't work for me. I don't have any friends that are the representation of that. I don't see it on TV. How am I doing this? I am DIYing this. I'm creating my own little bisexual tool belt of things, and I don't know what I'm doing. And that's really scary, especially when people are like, aren't you getting married? Aren't you having kids? Aren't you doing this? And I'm like, I'm chilling, like, So, yeah, I think one of the biggest thing is religion and sort of parsing yourself from that. I hope that made sense. It made sense in my mind, kind of, sort of, but I hope that made sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah, there was a comment in the chat about compulsory heterosexuality, right? Which I think, a lot of us have had to deconstruct that as women, as queer women. And yeah, I think Fiona, I really appreciate your comment about trans folks. And, I think there's a natural affinity with the B with the T. And I think bi women, trans women, we hold so much magic. So I think
Yeah.
we all need to
Can
start.
I add just a little slither? Because I want to make it like I put this in the chat, and I am fully aware that most trans people are bisexual. What's interesting is like the political attack is just so focused on this completely wrong, horrific, um, lack of knowledge, like of portraying who trans people are, and sexual orientation isn't talked about at all. And not that I want them to pull that in as well. I just find that really interesting that there's just been this laser focus on the population of our community and just used in such horrific ways. And I will add that, yes, as bi plus, as the majority, we do have an opportunity to stand up and be more vocal and be louder to protect all of our people.
Yes. We all have our power in our sphere, right? Our own little locus of control. So I think it's important to use whatever power we have to stand together. So yeah, let's go out there and save the world. So, all of you have such amazing platforms, and you have so many fans, so many followers, and people who you've mentored. But, I'm curious, who are your role models? Who are the people, bi plus women or otherwise, that you have looked up to, on your journeys?
Mine are gonna go way back because I came out so long ago. Okay, so and they they continue. I continue to look up to people or admire people, women who identify as bi plus and are coming out as bi plus. But I think because I came out before so many of them that are coming out now, I always look to the ones who were before me. So I will say when I saw this question, I immediately for me, Ani DeFranco. For those of you who don't know Ani DeFranco, she's like an indie folk artist with like punk and jazz influences, and she's a savant, whatever. Anyway, I'm obsessed with her. But she's an incredibly prolific recording artist, and she has like over 20 albums and has been recording since the 90s. And when I came out, actually my totally straight cousin had seen her perform at like a college bar randomly in like 1999 and got the CD, her live CD Living in Clip out of that. And I heard the song In or Out. And then I also started listening to like Two Little Girls, and there were like references to the fact that she was bisexual, and not just lesbian, like was bisexual and was talking about that. And then my mind was blown. I was like, and I will say, going back again to this sort of like bi paradigm, it wasn't just that she was talking about that at a time when it was like very not okay to talk about it, and that she was being very unapologetic about it. It was that like everything that encompassed her lyrics and her experience of life, I related so deeply to. And as I got older, realized like, oh, that's in part because she has a bi paradigm. Like her ability to see that nuance and the way that she's experiencing people and relationships and stuff, like is distinctly bisexual. And I've found like over time, I was like, oh, yeah, it's one of the reasons I love Shakespeare. It's one of the reasons I gravitated to Walt Whitman. Like, and I only realized in retrospect that, at least, you know, insofar as historical accounts, if you can believe them, that these people were bisexual. And so I would say them. And then this sounds silly, but like at the time, I really looked up to Angelina Jolie because I was like, she was dating, you know, the Jenny Shimuzu. And I was like, that is not a thing that people do. And she was so unapologetic, like, no, this is, you know, I don't know if she still identifies as bi, you know, but in any case, back then, it was like a pretty radical thing to do. And I appreciated that she did it. So.
Who doesn't love Angelina? I don't know. I'm biased.
Fiona, do you want to go or do you want me to? You want to go?
Yeah, if you're ready, you go.
I don't know if I'm
ready,
ready, but I will go.
Okay, you go. Like,
I will say that my favorite bisexuals that I look up to are the people that are around me truly. Like I think that the bisexual women that I have created, my family around me, have really been the people that have taken me out of the mud in my darkest days. And while I love, you know, Megan Thee Stallion and I love Marilyn Monroe, great bisexuals, I love them. I don't really know them. And so I feel like the people that I know that have in my circle who have really just fought for the liberation of themselves within their world have and seeing what they went through and the conversations they had to have with their parents and going back during the holidays every Christmas. I'm like, wow, like that takes a lot of strength. And so I am deeply and profoundly inspired by the bisexual women around me, truly and deeply.
yeah, my response actually, Charmee, is like very, very similar. Like, because I can't really think of many characters or like famous people that I've ever been drawn up from. But I'll tell you two instances on a personal level. When I first came out as gay slash lesbian in 2004, I had a friend, her name is Sarah. I've not seen Sarah since around 2007, 2008. Like that's how long it's been since we've ever talked. But I remember at that time, um, she was married, maybe still is married, in a heteronormative marriage at the time, but she had come out to herself as being bisexual. And I remember holding biphobia against her. And I remember like thinking, but can't you just be gay? Like I felt so frustrated that she wasn't gay like us, gay like me. And I would say I feel ashamed, but really that's my journey. That's my story. That's how I felt at that time. Like that's how people feel. And now I've obviously grown and changed and have a more expansive understanding. But Sarah had so much freaking courage to be bisexual in 2004, 2005 in a marriage and share that with her closest friends. And so I think of her often now. I need to try and find her. I think she might have gone back to Australia, but yeah, she's amazing. And then the second instance I want to say, and that involves Mimi and Ellen, who might still be on the call, like when a group of us got together in 2022 and we went to the White House and had a meeting to advocate at the White House for healthcare concerns for the BIPOC community. I think that, and then also actually previous years, there were some meetings, but then in 2022 was like, it felt like really close knit. And I felt for the first time camaraderie amongst other bisexual people. And it was like some of the first times I've ever been in a room of like 20 or 30 people who everyone uses bi plus. Like it was just so magical. And I think those moments, those meetings over through the Obama administration and then through the Biden administration, like those people, all of you have all really, really inspired me. And to everybody on this call, by the way, if I haven't met you yet or not, you're inspiring me. And it's like that's what I carry. It really makes my heart feel warm. And thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an amazing convening, Fiona, and my first time meeting you in person. But yeah, I highly recommend if you haven't, gone to Bi Plus community events to go, because that's where you can surround yourself with other, folks who understand, who get it, where you don't have to explain yourself. Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, that is all the time we have for my questions, even though I have probably a gazillion more that I'd love to follow up with you all on. We'll have to do a part 2 or something. But I wanted to open up the floor for questions from the audience. And I see a couple questions now. So, Erin, you can help me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first question, what's one misconception about bisexuality or fluidity that you encounter most often in your respective fields, and how or do you address it?
A great question.
If I can start, because I
Go ahead.
Um, so I think this is, again, like within our fields is also going to be reflected in life, right? It's all connected. So when I say that this comes up in my field, I also mean it comes up all the time in private life and all of it. But yeah, the assumption that the gender of whoever I'm with determines what my sexuality is, So like bisexual erasure, right? That is something that is like rampant, and it's just like it's having to train people out of it to sort of stop looking through that binary lens and go like, oh, this might not be what meets the surface. And so for me, and I will say that insofar as my industry is concerned and my profession is concerned specifically, I hate that this is the case, but those assumptions can be a liability for me, because there are a lot of calls for real queer people to play queer roles. And you can agree or disagree with that. That's a whole other panel. But there's a lot of preferring that queer people at least are considered heavily for queer roles. And if people find out I have a husband after I've been cast in a queer role, people panic, like actually panic that I've lied or that they have been lied to. And I had that happen on a set once. Luckily it never got to panic. It was just like huh, and one of my co-stars swooped in and took care of it. It was like, no. She's bisexual. Also, she currently has a girlfriend. Like I kind of like actually did the explaining of it to somebody. But that's the kind of thing where you're like, that is serious. That is something that calls my integrity into account. Is somebody making that assumption when they see that I'm married to a man? So it's a very serious issue, the erasure of bisexuality and the assumption that you are straight or gay depending on the person that you're with. So definitely it comes up. Yeah.
I would say a misconception that grinds my gears is the idea that bisexual, particularly bisexual women, are the only people capable of centering men. Like that to me, I have been deconstructing that recently, and it really makes me angry. I think it's a misconception that especially even within the queer community, that we're the only people, like somehow like bisexuals like are like bowing at the feet of men, and like we only do things to be like very pick-me-esque. And I don't think that's true. I think centering men is a whole thing that you can deconstruct, and anybody is capable of doing. And it is deeply frustrating. And I think the second part of the question is like, how do I deal with it? I just talk about it on TikTok, and we just all kiki in the comments about, oh my God, yeah. But I think bringing awareness to it, you know, is really deeply important.
I think my reply is very similar to Nicole's in that an assumption is made on my sexual orientation label depending upon who I'm seeing with. And I've had, I can think of one example. He's a journalist, he's a cis gay man, and he knew I was dating my favorite ex-boyfriend and literally said, oh, so have you switched teams now? You know, you back to being straight. And I think that it's that kind of stuff that is more common than I would like. And I think, how do I deal with it? I mean, it's just like, I just say, no, I'm still bisexual, which, and then you got to go in that whole education. But I found it's even more exhausting when you hear that coming from the queer community, people who identify as lesbian and gay primarily. Like, yeah, that's common. I'm just thinking of another thread I'm on with like a group of queer women who primarily identify as lesbians, and a singer came out, Maren, and you know, she was saying, you know, if Maren now chooses to be gay, then or like women, then I'm here for it and her. And I think she'd actually come out as bisexual, and you know, it's just like that constant erasure. Yeah, it's really irritating, but we can do this. We can address it.
If I can just add one thing that I forgot to say, because you know, like in terms of getting ahead of the erasure, like this should not be our jobs to have to do what I'm about to say that I do, but if it helps somebody out there to adopt this technique, go for it. But I like walk around set and I'll be like, my husband, my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend. You know what I mean? Like, so if like you're not polyamorous, it's like, you know, drop the ex or that. Oh, I had a crush on, yeah, this chick in college, this blah, blah, blah. Like you're just like the way that people talk, it's just like using multiple genders to refer to your dating history, current or present, just in passing conversation. And then just allowing people to do what they will with that without having to give them an education on bisexuality or whatever it is and do all that work for them. I just, at this point, I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to be loud about that and whatever, talk about it like everybody else talks about their straight or gay relationships.
It's triggered me to, I have to say something else as well, in that what's so interesting is that when you talk about bisexuality, it always often comes down to dating and relationships and sexual activity. We have to remember that some bi people are ace as well. It's like, you know, you can you don't have to prove your sexual orientation by being in a relationship or having sex with anyone. Like you can be ace and bisexual as well, you know, and straight and ace.
Right. So yeah, I think it's great. I mean, these are all wonderful tips, and you know, Fiona, you mentioned earlier apparency. Was a nice reframing of the word visibility. But yeah, I think sometimes there's different ways to be more apparent and to bring your bisexuality into view, right? Yeah. So I'm wondering if this maybe kind of leads into this other question from the attendees, but there was a question about how to navigate experiencing bisexuality in a heterosexual presenting monogamous relationship.
I actually just spoke about this on a podcast episode. I'm not trying to plug, I'm really not, but I did truly just speak about this on my podcast. And Bi Invisibility, which is a really great resource on Instagram, Bi_invisibility. They talk about exploring sort of your bi identity. And it goes into what Fiona and Nicole were both saying, is this idea that you don't need to necessarily be in a relationship in order to explore this. Like personally, I genuinely thought that my queerness was going to be centered around sleeping with a bunch of people. And then once I decentered that, I realized that my queerness sort of like is now centered around community and like finding other queer people, other bi people to talk with. My favorite thing in the world, because I'm such a nerd, is I absolutely adore looking up bi history and looking up how many contributions bisexuals have made to the LGBTQ community. Like we are really there, like we are the ones. And so that feels very validating to me. Books, they actually suggested in the episode, like reading like YA books. A lot of times people feel like they're kind of missing out on firsts. And so reading these books can really like spark that like joy that you get from those first times. I think that bisexuality can be explored in so many different ways outside of sleeping with your same gender or different gender or whatever. It's like way like I think that's so limiting to view it through that lens. And so exploring it, whether you're in a relationship or not or whatever, even at, I this idea of like not feeling queer enough is like I feel like it's like one of the like asterisks of being bi. It's like you're constantly like, am I queer enough? Am I this enough? Am I that enough? And so feeling queer enough by exploring our history, by exploring our texts. We have such great, beautiful texts by such great, incredible writers. And a lot of times it's not publicized, but if you dig deep, there's some good, juicy, juicy, juicy stuff. And exploring your bisexuality through that lens is so powerful, deeply powerful.
Oh my God, yes. I'm going to be very brief because really you just said it. It's that you're so right. There are so many other ways than just dating people. And like even before I had come out as poly, like there were many years where I was dating monogamously and in a, hetero presenting relationship and things. And I would, at that time in my life at least, I'd be out in West Hollywood with my gay and bi friends. I'd be doing that like really unapologetically, getting involved in queer media and queer media circles, like finding community. There's a bi group through the LGBT center that I used to facilitate, a social group. Like there's do we say ambi or ambi, Mimi?
Well, when I started it in 2006, it was Ambi, but then it got rebranded as Ambi. But you know how bisexual that there's two different ways to pronounce it?
I love it. Yes. So ambi or ambi, depending on when you entered the chat, is a great community resource. There are so many ways to connect with the community in your bisexuality without dating outside of the relationship that you're currently in.
I don't know if I can add more to the answer to the question other than I find it really, really challenging. And I think I would just go back to, what Nicole and Charmee said, and that you have to find community and be with others. And that kind of pulls you through. Because I know in times when I've been in a hetero presenting monogamous relationship, I have felt a bit lost. But then at the same time, my work and what I do is so involved in the queer community. Sometimes I actually find it refreshing to be able to live and exist in all the different worlds. In the same way, I don't want to always be 100% in a queer space. And sometimes I want to dip into a heteronormative space. And then I want to get out of it too. And I guess that's part of being like bi plus and pan is like, I want to be in all the places, And it's like, when I feel like I'm losing a part of my identity, I know that where I can go get fed somewhere else. The most bisexual way of answering that question.
Why can't we have both, right? I mean, that's such a
it's not two, it's all.
yes, why can't we have
all the things?
Yes. And Ellen just mentioned the support group in Boston for Bi Plus Women, which is a long time group. So thank you so much. Ellen Rustrom is in the audience with us tonight, a bi-con amongst us. So I think there was a question. What kinds of tools or practices do you all utilize to overcome the micro and macro biphobic aggressions? I'm trying to figure out how to best overcome the alienation that accompanies being bi plus.
Having FaceTime chats with Erin and screaming about I just have to give a shout out to Erin who's here with the with the task force with LA by task force. We met recently in person for the first time and realized that we had been screaming at the same TV shows without even knowing each other exist. So I think it goes back to community and like, yeah, having little venting, laughing sessions about all the shit.
My coping mechanism is often to like feel the wound and maybe process it for a bit and then be loud. I'm a loud human being, and once I sort of once I allow myself to feel it and then I go, wait a second, this is like there's some internalized biphobia that's happening that I'm having to sort through. And none of what was said to me or what happened was my fault or is anything that I need to take on to my identity or that I need to take with me further in my life. Like, did that, been there, done that. And so then, like, I go online, I talk about it. I talk about it to my friends. I get louder about talking about the genders of my partners or people I've dated or my podcast that I did or, you know, the kind of media that I'm involved in or what I watch. Like, I just get louder about it, frankly. That is my way of combating that stuff, because the more that we like take it on ourselves, we're not only hurting ourselves, we're allowing these things to continue essentially. And I know not everybody has the same coping mechanisms, but that's what I do. I get loud.
I don't really know how to answer this because I don't know what I do. I feel like I'm such a baby gay still, that I'm like, what do I do? I feel like something that I did a lot in 2020 when I moved back home with my family and was facing a lot of microaggressions, like macro in the home, could not go anywhere. I would take a lot of walks. I would take a lot of walks and really process this. I would journal a lot. Um, and I would do a lot of writing. And yeah, it's funny because like now I look back at those journal entries and I'm like, oh, it's so wild that like you sometimes you feel like you have tunnel vision in life and you're like, I'm never gonna get through this. This horrible person keeps saying these biphobic things to me. And then like life is so funny sometimes. It's like a year later, I'm not even living there. Like I feel like remembering that life is fluid, like bisexuality, like remembering that the waves of life are going to come and flow. And it's hard when you're in the moment, I know. But just remembering, like, you know, I'm not beholden to this situation. I can always shift, I can always morph, I can always change. And I know this because I'm bi. And that's the magic of being bi.
Can I add one more thing to the magic of being bi? And like, I reminded my when you were speaking, it reminded me that I also do meditate as well, almost every day, and I strongly feel that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and so being able to step back and realize that microaggressions, the stories other people say about themselves and others, the stories say about ourselves, are just our mind chatter making up stories that don't really exist. And so we also have the power to choose to like let go of the story and choose to not let someone else put a story upon us. So there you go. That's the woo woo addition to that too as well.
These are all amazing, amazing suggestions. And I want to add following all of these lovely women on their social media is another tool, coping. Charmee, you're being humble. You post a lot of affirmations on your page, and I always love reading them. So I think those are really, really powerful. So as we wrap up, I'd love to hear any current projects that you all are working on that you maybe just want to do a little plug, something recent or something you're looking forward to in the new year.
Well, I'll plug. I am going on. I am just about to wrap filming on my third season of Criminal Minds Evolution, which is on Paramount Plus. Yes, it's like season 3 of Evolution, but it's really season 18 of the show. So if you're a Criminal Minds fan, there you go. So I'm doing that, and I play a queer character in a queer relationship with Aisha Tyler's character, and it's been. I'm actually particularly excited about the representation of that relationship in this upcoming season. So that drops, that should be dropping fairly early in 2025. So keep an eye out for it. Otherwise, I have some things I can't talk about, but that are fun, and just you can follow. I will talk about them soon when I can. Follow me at Nicole Pacent on Instagram. That's where I'll post about all the stuff. So thank you, everybody.
And feel free to drop all your handles in the chat, or if anyone else, yeah, wants to post in the chat as well.
You want to go next, Charmee, or shall I do it? Me? Okay. So I will drop my website, freelineproductions.com. There's my line tattoo. So my website has links to the films that I've done and animation. I've got a 2-minute animation on the difference between the words cisgender and transgender, another one on the difference between biological sex, gender, sexual orientation, all that kind of stuff. Also, my first book is titled Are Bisexuals Just Greedy? Dedicated to my dad. And then that's the not safe for work version. It's got very explicit words in it. And then the safer for work version is what does that LGBTQA plus label mean? And then I'm thrilled, I can tell you what I'm working on, which is an unscripted docu-follow series called Out with Fiona. And it's positive stories of kindness and courage from the LGBTQA2S plus community. Season 1 will be in Texas. PBS has, given us distribution. Now just got to raise the money to get into production. So when will it come out? I mean, my goal is to be shooting this time next year, premiering in 2026, and then winning our first Emmy in 27. So just watch the space. I'm not very active on social, but my handle, I'll put it in the chat, but it's at Fiona J. Dawson. And I love you all, and I thank you.
Okay, I am very active on social. I do a lot of social things. But to start off, I wrote a book. It's called Confessions of a Bisexual. If you can kind of sort of see it, maybe I need to be like an influencer girly and put my hand up. But Confessions of a Bisexual, it's an interactive memoir for baby gays. So if you want playlists, if you want journaling, if you want fun activities and like a multimedia experience of bisexuality, as you're exploring your bisexuality, that's the book for you. It's really exciting. It was fun to write, and I just get so excited when people read it. And then I forget that I wrote it, and I'm like, oh shoot, I wrote a book. That's wild. So then there's that. I'm currently working on a one-woman show that I'm really, really excited about, which is a sort of basically me using the book as a reference of what my experience is. And yeah, I'm very excited about that. Currently writing that. I have a podcast called Hot by Summer. So if you want to kiki about pop culture and TV and film, and I have lots of big opinions, big opinions. So if you want those, definitely listen to my podcast. I have a Substack. I love it to write. But yeah, Bi Astrology, if you want the tea, the fun is on Bi Astrology, and then the tea is on TikTok. If you want the tea, the real tea, the dating tea, then go to TikTok. But yeah, those are all my socials.
Amazing. So many things to follow and look forward to from our incredible panel. I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. You all have been just so fabulous. This has been a magical panel. And thank you so much for being here, and all of you in the audience. Thank you so much for attending today, sharing your lovely questions, sharing your amazing comments, and just sharing the love today. So thank you so much for attending our Bi-alogue, and look forward to more. Follow us, LABTF, at LA by Task Force. That's our Instagram. We're on Facebook, and we have a YouTube channel. So look forward to seeing you all next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Charmee.
Bye.